In today's story, we're diving into the mind of a killer unlike any other. A man who committed crimes so gruesome, so unspeakable, that they earned him the chilling title, the Devil Mask Killer. But what was it that led him to this dark path, and what were the horrifying crimes that cemented his legacy in history? That's exactly what we're about to uncover. Sometimes, when parents fail their children, the consequences are nothing short of catastrophic. We've all heard of criminals whose descent into darkness began at home, neglect, abuse, and torment shaping them into something monstrous. Imagine a child, broken and abandoned, growing up to see the world not as a place of hope, but as an enemy to be destroyed. This was the tragic beginning of Anthony Arkwright. Born in England in 1967, Anthony's life was doomed from the start. His parents were far from loving caregivers. His mother abandoned the family completely, walking away without a second thought, leaving behind her husband and 5 children, including Anthony. It wasn't the usual story of a father abandoning his kids. No, this time it was the mother who disappeared without a trace, leaving their fate in the hands of a man who could barely take care of himself. Anthony's father, unable to handle the burden, made a decision that would alter his son's destiny forever. He sent all 5 children to an orphanage. From that moment on, Anthony was alone. And what happened to his siblings after that, no one really knows. But what we do know is that Anthony's story was about to take a dark turn. Life in the orphanage was no escape from the cruelty he had known at home. It was worse. Abuse, neglect, suffering. These were Anthony's only companions. And as time passed, his heart hardened. The once innocent boy became a troublemaker. He started picking fights, destroying property, and stealing, at first just small things. But soon, his petty crimes escalated. Eventually, the law caught up with him. By his teenage years, Anthony was arrested for theft and sent to a juvenile detention center. It was supposed to rehabilitate him. Instead, it shaped him into something even more dangerous. Each time he was released, he returned to crime. Steal, get caught, serve time, repeat. It became a cycle, one that he had no interest in breaking. But then, something changed. While serving time, Anthony stumbled upon a book that would ignite an obsession within him, a book about serial killers. Among all the murderers detailed in its pages, one name captivated him more than any other: Jack the Ripper. He didn't just admire Jack, he idolized him. He envied his legacy, the fear he had instilled, the mystery that surrounded his name. And that's when Anthony made a vow, a promise whispered in the shadows of his prison cell. One day, I'll be just like him. By 1988, Anthony was 21 years old. And once again, he was released from prison. But this time, something was different. This time, he wasn't just a thief anymore. He found a job at a scrapyard, barely making enough to get by. He rented a tiny apartment where he met 2 neighbors who would soon become entangled in his twisted world. The first was Marcus Wright, a disabled man with whom Anthony frequently clashed. Their relationship was far from friendly. Fights, arguments, constant tension. It was only a matter of time before things escalated. The second was Raymond Ford, a retired schoolteacher who spent his days drowning in alcohol, suffocated by his own depression. Raymond was a broken man, lost in his own misery, barely stepping outside his apartment. To Anthony, Raymond wasn't just a neighbor, he was a target. He began tormenting him, mocking him, harassing him, pushing him further into despair. But that wasn't enough. Anthony had a sick sense of humor, and his pranks turned cruel. One of his favorite tricks, collecting dog feces and stuffing it inside Raymond's mailbox, forcing the man to open it and find filth instead of letters. And then things got worse. Anthony lost his job. His reckless behavior had finally caught up with him, and he was fired from the scrapyard. With nowhere to go and nothing to do, he spiraled into absolute destruction. He spent his nights drowning in alcohol, drinking until the world around him blurred. He would drink until daylight felt like night, until the pain of his past no longer felt real. But as the alcohol burned in his throat, memories flooded his mind. Memories of his abusive father, his absent mother, the orphanage that stole his childhood, the suffering that had shaped him. And then a dark thought crept in. Jack the Ripper didn't just sit around and drink, he acted. And in that moment, Anthony Arkwright made a decision that would carve his name into history as the Devil Mask Killer. In a dimly lit bank vault, surrounded by flashing red laser beams, Anthony's world was already spiraling out of control. The FBI jacket he once wore as a symbol of authority now served as a disguise for something far darker. But his fall from grace didn't begin here. No, this was just another chapter in a tale of rage, revenge, and madness. It all started with Raymond, a simple man, a neighbor, but also the one who had betrayed him. One accusation, just one, had been enough to turn Anthony's world upside down. Raymond had reported him to the police, claiming Anthony had stolen his watch. The humiliation burned deep, and Anthony made a promise to himself. Raymond would pay. Oh, he would pay dearly. But that wasn't the first thing on Anthony's mind. No, first he needed to see his grandfather, Stanislav. A strange name for an even stranger man. 68 years old, living alone on a quiet farm, unaware that his grandson was arriving, not for a visit, but for vengeance. "Anthony, my dear grandson, I've missed you," the old man greeted, smiling warmly. But Anthony didn't smile back. He stepped closer, his hand tightening around the cold steel in his pocket, and then, without a word, he struck. The knife plunged into his grandfather's throat, again and again and again. Blood painted the wooden floor beneath them, but Anthony wasn't done. He grabbed an axe, the very one his grandfather used for chopping wood, and brought it down onto the old man's chest. A sickening crunch echoed through the farm. And just to be sure, just to make absolutely sure, he found a hammer lying nearby. One final blow to the skull. The man who had raised him, the man who had once held him as a child, was now nothing more than a lifeless body on the barn floor. But Anthony wasn't finished. There was still one more witness. Inside the house, Elisa, the housemaid, was unaware of the horror that had just taken place outside. She had been taking care of Stanislav for years, never expecting this night to be any different. That was until Anthony walked in, still holding the blood-soaked axe. One strike, that was all it took. The blade met her forehead with a sickening thud, and she crumpled to the ground, lifeless. And then he left. Where does a man go after committing 2 brutal murders? A bar, of course. Anthony sat among lost souls, drowning himself in drink, numbing the screams that surely echoed in his mind. And then, almost absent-mindedly, he turned to a stranger beside him. "I'll see you in 25 years, he whispered. The man frowned. "What?" Anthony smiled. "Because tonight, I've done something that people will talk about for years to come." His words sent a shiver through the room, but before anyone could question him further, he was gone, disappearing into the cold night, his mind already wandering toward his next target. Raymond, the man who had dared to accuse him of theft. Anthony knew exactly how to get inside his house, a broken window, one he had seen countless times. Slipping through, he moved with the precision of a predator. But before he struck, he did something unsettling. He stripped everything, leaving only one thing, his mask, a devil's face, a grotesque symbol of the monster he had become. And then he saw him, Raymond, asleep, vulnerable, defenseless. Anthony lunged. The knife tore into flesh. 1, 2, 10, 50, 100. The count didn't matter anymore. The blade moved faster, his hands covered in warm, sticky blood. By the time he was finished, Raymond's body was unrecognizable. 500 stab wounds, broken ribs, a corpse so desecrated it was barely human. And then, as if nothing had happened, Anthony returned home. He showered, cleaned the blood, changed his clothes, and went to bed. By morning, the police were knocking on his door. He smirked. They had come for him. They had finally realized who he was. The terror, the legend, the new Jack the Ripper. But no, they weren't here for the murders. They were here for a stolen watch. Anthony's smirk faded. They weren't here to arrest him for the horrors he had committed. No, they still saw him as nothing more than a petty thief. And just like that, they let him go. He was free, free to kill again. So, where did Anthony go next? Back to the bar, back to the darkness, back to his demons. And then another name entered his mind. Marcus, the so-called friend who had taken cigarette after cigarette from Anthony, always promising to repay him, but never doing so. A liar, a parasite, someone who thought he could take from Anthony without consequences. So Anthony paid him a visit. Marcus opened the door, not knowing that death was standing before him, and before he could react, Anthony struck. A brutal, relentless attack. The knife plunged into Marcus 70 times before his body hit the floor. And yet, when it was all over, Anthony was still furious. What was it? What was this anger? He had taken revenge. He had killed those who wronged him. And yet, the rage inside him only grew stronger. Maybe, just maybe, his killing spree had only just begun. In a dark room inside a luxurious bank, red laser beams crisscross guarding the massive metal vaults. In the center of the room, a man wearing a black mask and an FBI vest stands still, gripping a bag overflowing with shimmering jewels. Behind him, a computer screen flickers, displaying the bank's security system, hacked and compromised. Outside, flashing blue and red lights from police cars reflect ominously against the window, signaling that time is running out. The heavy vault door remains open, a silent testament to the high-stakes heist. Will he make it out, or will justice finally catch up with him? Until now, neither the police, the media, nor the victims' families had the slightest idea about the crimes he had committed. 4 murders. His grandfather, the housemaid, Raymond, and now Marcus, had gone unnoticed. No suspicions, no headlines, no whispers of terror in the city streets. And that, more than anything, infuriated Anthony. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted recognition. He wanted fear. He wanted his name etched into history alongside the likes of Jack the Ripper. But how? How could he make sure the world knew about him? Anthony had an idea. If no one was talking about his crimes, then he would force them to. He went to the last victim's mother, Marcus's mother. He stood at her doorstep, his face a mask of feigned concern. "You don't know what happened to your son, do you?" he asked, his voice heavy with false sympathy. Her eyes widened, her hands trembling. "What do you mean? What happened to my son? Is he okay?" Anthony took a deep breath, savoring the moment. He killed himself. In his apartment. I thought you should know." The words hit her like a sledgehammer. Without a second thought, she ran to her son's apartment. The moment she pushed the door open, her world shattered. The sight before her was beyond human comprehension. Marcus lay motionless, drenched in his own blood. But that wasn't the worst part. His eyes, they were gone. Empty sockets gaped back at her, filled with cigarette butts, packed tightly as if mocking her. His mouth, his ears, his nose, every possible orifice was stuffed with cigarettes. The message was clear. This was Anthony's twisted revenge. But he wasn't done. On Marcus's chest, using cigarette ashes, Anthony had drawn a cross, branding his victim with his own personal signature. And then there was his stomach, ripped open, intestines spilling onto the floor, his insides meticulously arranged in a grotesque display. Marcus's mother collapsed, her mind struggling to grasp the horror before her. Somehow, she gathered the strength to call the police, and when they arrived, she told them everything. She told them about Anthony, how he was the one who had informed her about her son's death, how his words had led her to this nightmare. The police wasted no time. They tracked Anthony down and arrested him immediately. But in the interrogation room, he played the game well. "Me? No, you've got the wrong guy," he said, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "I didn't kill anyone." But they knew. They could see it in his eyes, the pride, the arrogance. He wanted this. He wanted their attention. Then, in an unexpected move, Anthony reached into his pocket and pulled out a deck of playing cards. He fanned them out and pulled 4 specific cards. "These," he said, his voice dripping with amusement, "represent the 4 bodies you found so far." He held up one card and then tossed it aside. "That's Marcus. You found him, right?" He threw another card away. "And Raymond. Found him too, huh? That leaves 2 more. 2 bodies you still haven't discovered. Want to play a little game?" The detectives, both enraged and horrified, pressed him for more details. But Anthony only laughed. "Find them yourselves." With no other leads, the police turned to Anthony's past, questioning anyone who had ever been close to him. His parents were useless, his mother had abandoned him, and his father had given him up long ago. That left only one person, his grandfather. When they arrived at his home, their worst fears were confirmed. The old man was dead, brutally murdered. A hatchet embedded in his chest. His skull caved in from a hammer strike, and beside him, the housemaid lay lifeless, her body twisted in a pool of crimson. That made 4 confirmed murders. Back in the interrogation room, Anthony smirked. "So, you found them all, huh?" Then, as if revealing a grand finale, he leaned in and whispered, "Or did you?" The detectives froze. "What do you mean?" Anthony chuckled. "There's a 5th body. "Where? I'll give you a hint," he said, leaning back with satisfaction. "It's in the lake." They mobilized instantly. Teams of divers scoured the depths of the murky waters, combing every inch for the supposed corpse. Hours passed, then days, but nothing. No remains, no evidence. Frustrated, they dragged Anthony back into the room. "There's nothing in that lake. We checked everything. Where's the body?" Anthony grinned. "Oh, that? Yeah, I lied. There was never a fifth body. But hey, at least I kept you busy." Rage surged through the officers. He had played them, manipulated them, toyed with them like they were nothing. But it didn't matter anymore. They had enough. The case was closed. Anthony was convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder. The judge's words were chilling. "Anthony, I acknowledge that you endured a troubled childhood, but that does not excuse the unimaginable cruelty of your actions. After reviewing reports from 3 separate psychiatrists, I have no doubt that you are a menace to society. The horror of your crimes leaves me no choice but to sentence you to life in prison, without the possibility of parole." As for the lead investigator, he summed it up best. "From the moment we brought him in after Marcus's murder, Anthony was proud. He thought this would make him infamous, that people would admire him. He was just a disturbed child, desperate for attention, and, in his twisted mind, killing was his way of getting it. In my 25 years of law enforcement, I have never met someone as dangerous as Anthony." And so, to this day, Anthony remains locked away, his name fading into obscurity. He wanted to be a legend, but in the end, he became nothing more than a forgotten monster, rotting in a prison cell, far from the fame he so desperately craved. And that's how the story of Anthony Arkwright comes to an end. A man who craved infamy but was left to rot in obscurity. In the end, history didn't remember him as a legend, but as just another forgotten monster behind bars. Evil can hide in the most unexpected places, and seeking fame through bloodshed only leads to destruction. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. See you in the next case. Stay safe.